And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Thank you for joining us on the marine portion of your broadcast. I'm meteorologist Emily Niebuhr. First, we have some very important outage information for you. We already have the NOAA weather radio outage has started. Started at 2 p.m. on Friday, August 25th. It's going to continue until 5 p.m. Monday, August 28th. The following stations are going to be impacted: Utqiagvik, Kotzebue, Nome, Bethel, St. Paul, Unalaska, Cold Bay, and Yakutat. Remember, you can always reach our products online. Our forecast warnings and tsunami information are available at weather.gov or tsunami.gov. Again, weather.gov and tsunami.gov. So what are the implications of this outage? Some service, hydrologic, and ship observations might be unavailable. 12Z, 4 a.m. upper air observations, excluding Utqiagvik and Anchorage, will be unavailable. NOAA weather radio at 8 sites will be out of service. Alaska Aviation Weather Unit graphics may be delayed or unavailable. Some Alaska Weather TV graphics may be delayed or unavailable. And experimental Alaska Aviation guidance will be unavailable. So again, this outage started Friday, August 25th at 2 p.m. It's going to continue until Monday, August 28th. But again, you can reach our forecast online at weather.gov or tsunami.gov. Let's take a look at our sea ice. Currently, again, light blue is less than 80% concentration. It does not indicate thickness, but it does tell us how much ice is in the area. You can see we have some sea ice still left near Prudhoe Bay, some offshore of Utqiagvik. But again, we continue to see the seasonal melting. Tonight's weather, we have a lot of active weather occurring, strong pressure gradients that are going to be impacting the marine community over the next few days. So we have high pressure to the west. We have another high pressure system to the east, a low pressure system in the middle, moving into the eastern Bering. So pressure gradients across much of Alaska are going to be driving strong winds across Kodiak Island and the Gulf of Alaska. Southwesterly flow. We have more northeasterly flow through the Bering Strait. That low continues to slowly move northward Saturday, but that pressure gradient continues. Strong southwesterly flow. Ridge starts to build into the eastern central portions of the Bering, again driving that gradient. And finally, Sunday, that ridge becomes dominant across much of the eastern and central Bering. This low begins to dissipate. The southwesterly flow begins to dissipate. But we have a new low pressure system moving in towards western areas of the Bering. For Saturday's marine forecast in interior areas, again, we're looking at waves 2 to 3 feet, winds 10 to 15 knots. As you go out of sheltered areas into the Gulf of Alaska, expect waves about 5 feet and winds about 20 knots, with strongest winds up near Yakutat at 20 knots. Sunday, as that front pushes a little further eastward towards the eastern part of the Gulf of Alaska, we do see waves up to 7 feet near Yakutat, 5 to 6 feet all along the Gulf Coast, and winds about 10 to 15 knots. In sheltered areas, we're seeing waves of about 2 to 3 feet. We're also seeing winds of about 10 knots. For your south central forecast, we are looking at, for your Saturday, some pretty good winds and waves across the area. We're looking at about 8-foot waves, 7-foot waves south of the Kenai Peninsula, with winds up to 30 knots. Going into southern portions of Cook Inlet, waves up 7 feet, even north of Homer, and waves up to 3 feet as you go towards Anchorage. Even in usually sheltered Prince William Sound, waves up to about 4 feet on your Saturday, winds 20 knots, and could be stronger in areas of channeled terrain. And even along the north Gulf Coast, we're looking at waves about 6 feet, winds 20 knots. For Sunday, as that front moves further east, the stronger winds and waves move further east. So again, we have 6 to 7 foot waves south of Prince William Sound. We're about 2 feet in Prince William Sound. Waves about 5 feet south of Homer, but strong winds and waves continue across much of interior Cook Inlet. So winds about 15 to 20 knots, but waves 4 to 5 feet. For Saturday, as we go further east, or west, you'll see south of Kodiak Island and south of the Alaska Peninsula, waves 8 to 9 feet, winds up to 30 knots just outside of Kodiak. Shelikof Strait, we're seeing waves of about 5 feet. In Bering Sea, we're looking at waves about 3 to 4 feet, winds of about 25 knots. Sunday, that system skirts to the east, and so we end up with waves about 5 feet, but still about 8 feet outside of Kodiak Island. Waves up to 4 feet in Shelikof, and in the Bering, about 4 to 6 foot waves with winds generally 20 to 15 knots across the area. Across Unalaska Islands, we have that system moving through on Saturday. So waves about 8 to 9 feet, winds 20 to 25 knots. In the central Aleutian Islands, waves 5 to 7 feet with winds about 15 to 25 knots. And as you go further west, winds 15 to 20 knots, waves about 5 feet. Sunday, as that new low pressure system moves towards the western Aleutians, we see waves of about 7 to 9 feet. Winds about 25 to 30 knots. In the central Aleutians, waves about 7 to 5 feet, winds 20 to 30 knots. In the Bering Sea near the Pribilos, we're looking at waves of about 10 feet on Saturday, winds of about 30 knots. Again, that strong northwesterly pressure gradient. We're seeing winds of about 9 feet north of the Pribilos, about 5 feet near Savonia, but winds about 20 knots. 3 feet in Nome with winds up to 15 knots. Sunday, near the Pribilos, conditions calm down a little bit. We got 6 foot waves with 15 knot wind. And as we go towards Nome, though, that pressure gradient changes. So we're looking at waves about 6 feet, winds about 20 knots near Nome. Meanwhile, 3 foot waves near Bristol Bay with winds about 20 knots. For your Saturday near Shishmaref, we're looking at waves about 8 feet, winds 20 to 25 knots. As we go along the Arctic coast, those strong winds and waves continue, especially in ice-free waters. So outside Prudhoe Bay, expect waves up to 6 feet, winds up to 25 knots. By Sunday, we're expecting waves about 5 feet, winds about 10 to 15 knots. Near Shishmaref, waves about 5 to 7 feet, winds about 25 knots.